I'm Mark Hennick. This is So-Called Normal. Hey everyone, I'm Mark Hennick. Welcome to So-Called Normal. Today on the show, I'm really excited for this one. We have the guys from Sickboy. Now, if you don't know what Sickboy is, go over and listen to their podcast that's been fairly long running right now. It's very popular, where they talk to people like me with health conditions, usually with chronic conditions, sometimes people who are dying, who are suffering in the worst kinds of ways. And I know I'm probably making it sound really bad, and the stories can be really bad and difficult to get through, but they're so important, and the work that they're doing is so important. And the guys there, Jeremie, Taylor, and Brian, are just really solid people who, you develop a relationship with people, whatever medium they're on. We got to know each other a little bit more when I did their show, and I talked about my own experiences, and that was around, I had just finished the first draft of my book, and it was around the time where I just started to really actually identify in a clearer way what the timeline was of my own experiences. And I hadn't realized before, because I was writing this blog post for my episode of their podcast when I was on, so go check that out too. And I had realized that I had been formally struggling with the mental health system, with depression and anxiety and even suicidal thoughts, from as early as about 10 years old. And I had never really pegged it to that age before. I knew that I had my first hospitalization was when I was 12. But I had never really tracked it to that. And it almost certainly would have been earlier than that, of course, because that's just when I was struggling more overtly. So that was really important for me, I think, to realize that I'd been dealing with some of the stuff that I was talking about on their episode for longer than I haven't, for most of my life, actually. So I got into some stuff when I was on their show that I'd never really talked about before or since. So it was a lot of fun. Go check it out and listen to some of their other episodes as well. But especially, before you do that, listen to this episode, since you've already started listening, and we got into a bit of it. You might notice in a couple of points during our conversation that they take over the hosting duties. So I think that's probably an occupational hazard of being podcast hosts, that they just play off each other so well. So I think we had a great conversation. I think you'll enjoy it. So have fun. Listen to the end, because I got some important information for you on the back end as well. I'm Mark Hennick. This is So-Called Normal, and here's my conversation with Sickboy.
But this is cool that you've got a podcast, because you were on our podcast.
I was, and that's actually, I had been thinking about it for a long time before, but just being able to see what you guys were able to do and to have such interesting conversations, but to keep it light and to keep it interesting, it was really inspiring for me in that respect. So, I'd be interested in learning more about how the idea came up to do it, how you figured it out, how it went.
The long end of it is, so all right, speaking about Halifax, I was performing as an actor in the city, and back in like 2015, somewhere around there was a big thing that happened where they cut out the Nova Scotia had this really amazing film tax credit. So there's a lot of like awesome film work happening in the city, in Halifax and in the province in general, and the government kind of axed the tax credit, and the whole industry sort of fizzled out. And a lot of my friends were people who were in that industry, and a lot of them had to move away and leave. And that was kind of the thing that I poured all of my heart and soul into, was to be, a film and stage actor. But I really loved film. And it was like I woke up one day and that was all taken away from me. And it was also kind of ramping up to the winter months. And so I think like a culmination of those two things, I actually like went into this. It was the first time I ever can say that I was ever really depressed. And so I started to see a therapist, and really like had a hard time shaking this whole thing, because the reason why I felt so depressed was because I'm a very like creative person, and I need a creative outlet. And the one thing that I could do to satiate that need to express myself creatively, I couldn't do it.
Yeah, people who struggle with depression in particular seem to be disproportionately creative types. I'm sure you must have encountered that in your community at the time, the people that you worked with.
Oh yeah, for sure. Yeah, absolutely.
It was a tough time. Like it was very, and everybody knew it. It wasn't. It was very vocal because the film community was very, very vocal about the tax credit, and it didn't just stay within that community. Like everybody knew. And it was very much front of mind for a long time with like Nova Scotians that the government had done this thing that was really kind of decimating this industry.
Yeah. So Taylor and Brian, were you guys involved in the film community as well as acting?
No, I just moved home. I was living in Dubai for 4 years.
Oh, really?
And I was working in business development, and I liked living there, but it wasn't the same as being home. So after 4 years, I moved back home, and I was looking to start my own business. I took a real estate course, and this is right around the exact same time that this all happened with the film tax credit. And Taylor and I, we always knew that we wanted to work on something together.
Brian and I have been friends for 18 years now.
18 years.
Yeah.
So when Taylor was just at the same time, Taylor was getting ready to open a yoga studio. So we had we started planning this Wednesday night meetup at the New Halifax Library, where we would just get together and kind of work on our own thing, but hopefully down the road it would become something that we could do together. And
it was like time to work on our passion projects. Like, what are we working on outside of our main kind of things, and how can we? And then, like you said, Brian, like how can that possibly come together as something that we all do together?
Right.
How old were you when you were doing this? I was thinking about this.
This is when I moved home, it was 3 years ago.
So I would have been 27.
I would have been 25.
And I would have been 26.
Okay.
Yeah. And meanwhile, while they're doing this, and I'm in this bout of depression, Kevin Smith, the director, comes to Halifax to screen his movie Tusk, which if you've never watched it, highly recommended.
Oh man,
it is pure chaos. It's amazing. And so he screens this movie, and he also does this thing called an evening with Kevin Smith. It's basically a speaking session where he answers questions, but he talks so much, and he talks so eloquently. He's really great at it.
He's a storyteller.
So within a 3-hour period, there's maybe about 80 people lined up to ask questions. He gets through maybe 3, right? So within this 3-hour talk, someone brings up podcasting, and he's a podcast mogul. He has a podcast network. He's got several podcasts on the go.
He hosted one on Frasier called Talk Salad and Scramble Eggs.
Yeah. He's got all these very specific podcasts.
They do, but he spent most of the time talking about Star Wars, as he does on most of his shows.
That sounds like Kevin Smith.
It sounds like most of his podcasts. And so I'll never forget what he said, which his answer to this person's question, I don't even remember what they asked him, but his response started with, podcasting is the perfect form of creative expression because everybody in this room can start a podcast. Everybody in this room has a phone. If you have a phone and you have an idea or something that you are passionate about, you have a podcast, because it doesn't matter how out there, how wild, how wacky that thing is that you're passionate about. There's at least one other person who's also interested in that same thing, and they're going to listen to what you have to say. And it doesn't matter if it's one person or if it's 100,000 people, because this is your thing that you've created and you can do. And when he said that, I remember just all of a sudden just being slammed with this sense of gratitude. It was like the first time this was the thing I was looking for, right? Like this was the thing that I had my acting was taken away from me. And then he just says this, and I go, I can start a podcast. I can talk about what it's like to be sick and call it Sickboy. Literally in that moment, had that thought and went, it's not a bad idea. All right. I'll sit with it.
Is that something that you had talked a lot about before in your other work?
No, not at all. No. No. And so I sat with that idea for a couple of weeks, and then knew that these guys were having these little weekly meetings. And when I came to one of those hangouts at the library. I was like, they were talking about what can we want to start something. And
we were talking about some of our favorite. We were just talking about podcasts that we loved at the time, and we were like, because the three of us were podcast fans before we ever decided to make one, and then when we were talking about some of our favorite podcasts, that's when Jared brought up the idea. He was like, guys, we should do this. Except his idea was actually terrible.
I don't know about terrible, but it definitely wasn't. It was a different idea.
Well, what was the original idea?
Well, the original idea was I would sit down with a doctor, and we would have a guest on, and so like the doctor would be there to be the smart one and have he's the encyclopedia. He has all the information that we would need if the person didn't know what they had or couldn't describe what it meant to live with MS or whatever. And then I was just kind of there as like the comedic relief. And then we would talk to someone who was sick.
But the catch was that the doctor is really, really dry and really doesn't find Jeremie's humor funny.
You're straight, man. Yeah.
It's funny because like if there's people who listen to Sickboy who are listening to this conversation, and some people might be thinking like, man, that would be so much better because it's three idiots. Like,
we tripled the idiotness.
They're just like
the idiocracy of our show.
I wonder what that podcast would be like.
Right. Well, so that was the idea, and I said to these guys, and then you guys were like, well, let's do. Someone had the idea of going, let's do an episode where you two will for the pilot episode, you two were going to be the guest hosts, and I was going to be the guest. So it was like, all right, the two guest hosts are going to ask me the questions because I'm the sick person. And then once we get that out of the way, we'll go into me and somebody else interviewing these sick people. And so we went into the recording studio, talked for about an hour, came out, immediately went back to Taylor's house, listened to it, and we were like, beside ourselves with how it was this conversation that was for us truly really funny, really sort of like eye-opening and educational in a way, because there was a lot that you guys learned about myself and about cystic fibrosis that you didn't know.
I had known you for about 5 years at this point. And I thought that I pretty much knew everything because when when Jeremie and I first met, we were in Brazil. And we were sharing a room together at a yoga teacher training. And I didn't meet him until the moment that I was basically introduced to my roommates. And I was brought into this room at like 1 a.m. because I got to this like really remote spot on the beach in Brazil. It's amazing, like paradise. And I go in, and Jeremie's got a thing that he's sucking vapor out of. And I walk into the room thinking, oh, this is cool here. This is fine for you to be doing that, and he's like, oh,
you thought I was getting high.
I thought
I was getting high. I'm really
Jared's
sucking
getting high.
back my nebulizer, which is like Ventolin and like hypertonic saline to like clear my lungs out.
But it was really like the introduction to or the start of the comfort level of talking about what it's like for Jeremie to be sick, because I just went, hey, what's that?
Yeah,
and he
caught me in the middle of my treatment.
Yeah,
which is like not a lot of people see.
And that was the first time we met. And then Jeremie said, oh, well, it's actually this because I have cystic fibrosis. And then that led to, oh, well, so what does it do? What's it doing to your lungs? And then it just started this, we were instantly best friends, and that really started kind of this comfort level.
I was going to say, do you think like one of the things that we've learned through recording the podcast is that like an hour of like intimate conversation can really bring you close together with someone, but especially talking about things like sickness that people, when they talk about, they're being very vulnerable. But do you think that your relationship with Jeremie Taylor is like it? Do you think that it evolved so quickly because of that catalyst of talking about what it's like to?
I don't think so.
There was a lot of factors that played into.
There's a lot. Yeah,
Jeremie and I very much falling in love with each other. That helped.
Yeah, it helped.
Yeah,
but also like similar age. We were at a yoga retreat. We were like one of very few men. We were both like,
we slept we had to sleep in a single bed together for a month.
Yeah, basically. Yeah. But so then, coming back to that original conversation, the other thing was that it was really empowering. It was like this really empowering experience, and I think we were all shocked at how well it worked with the three of us. And it's like looking back at it now, it makes sense. Like we have a very unique, not unique, but we have a very special dynamic between the three of us, and we vibe off each other really well. And it came through in this recording. And so we thought, well, maybe that was a fluke, right? Like maybe that was just a one-off thing because it was the three of us. Mm-hmm. But what if we tried it? What if we tried it with somebody else? What if we were the hosts and we just bring somebody else in? So we thought up of the sickest person we could think of, which is my friend Matt Amiot at the time, had brain cancer. And I called up Matt and I was like, hey, do you want to come in and make some jokes about your brain cancer? And he was like, absolutely. And Matt came in, same thing. We recorded about an hour. And at the end of that hour, we went back and we listened, and it was even more hilarious, educational, and like madly inspiring than the first.
That's still a benchmark episode to this day.
100%.
That was it was those three things that you mentioned: education, inspiration, and humor. Like those are things that we've strived for since the beginning.
Yeah.
And like that episode was all of those three things in a pretty perfect balance, I think.
Yeah, Matt set that ball rolling for us.
Absolutely.
And yeah.
And it sounds like, though, you said at the top that it surprised you that you guys were so popular right now, but it sounds like you knew you had something pretty special right from the beginning.
Yeah, but see, I thought we had something special for like friends and family. Yeah. Right in the beginning. And then we were like, we got really excited about it because it was fun. And so we were like, let's get a domain. So we got a website. And then we were like, let's make a blog post. Like we can make a blog that goes with it. Yeah. So we made a blog. And so I wrote the first blog post, and it was something like, hey everybody, my name is Jeremie. I'm dying of cystic fibrosis. And it's not as bad as it sounds. And it was like this kind of goofy, we're finding humor in the darkness of being ill. And we put that blog post out. And I remember getting in a car the next day to go to Osheaga, to drive to Osheaga. Like my whole outlook was like, gonna get real fucked up over the next weekend. And as we're gearing up to go, these media outlets start calling us, and they're like, hey, we want to cover Sickboy. We want to talk about your blog post. We went from like no one knowing what the website was the first day that we put it up to the next day having somewhere north of 10,000 hits. It was like, what the fuck?
It was a process of continuously being surprised that we had to keep up with a demand. Like there was that not knowing that anybody outside of our friend circle or our family circle would find this interesting, because you have relationships that you go, oh, we have a great relationship and we think we're really funny and we have really interesting conversations. But when you try to think of outside of that, like if somebody looking in was listening to this, would they think that this was interesting, or would they think that this is funny? And the answer is usually no. And that's definitely what we thought. Yeah. So it was just this crazy surprise that we were sitting down and being friends and talking to somebody, and other people found that interesting. And then trying to keep up with the demand. Hey, record more episodes. What are you guys doing?
It wasn't until that we started to really like figure out what it was we were actually doing.
But at this point still, like, we had just put this blog post out. Like we didn't have any podcast episodes out. Right. So people are like anticipating this podcast.
Heard anything. That's right.
And we were still like 2 months from being ready to launch. So it was kind of interesting because we had this like spike in people who are like, what's this podcast all about? I'm going to read this blog post. But then we couldn't actually show them anything for another 2 months.
Figuring it out as you're going.
I think that really speaks to how much the public was craving another way to engage with talking about illness.
Why do you think that is?
I think just because of the cloud that usually hangs over that type of conversation. I mean, it's inherently heavy, and there's a lot of darkness in that realm. And taking the route of infusing some lightness, trying to extract some of the humor out of the experience of being sick, and approaching it from that direction, just makes it more accessible for, I think, the average person to talk about it.
Yeah.
And it started to something I always go back to is that we're trying to bridge the gap between people who are sick and people who aren't, so that it's more accessible for not only the people who are sick to talk about it for, but for the people who are not sick to listen and be able to listen with open ears and provide insight or just to be simply the ear to that comforts the person who needs to talk.
I think it's a unique stepping stone to having the conversations yourself in your own life too, because it can be really challenging to talk about your own personal experiences and to be vulnerable in that sense. But if you can actually listen to two people doing it or a group of people doing it, then it's almost like, okay, I see where that went and I see how that can be done. And now I can extrapolate some of that stuff and apply it to my own life so I can go and use that as a tool to have my own conversations. I know for me personally, like my mom had bladder cancer a couple of years ago, and we'd already been doing this podcast, and it was really easy for me to come and ask somebody questions who I didn't have that personal relationship with. But when it came to actually asking my mom about her illness, that was a lot more difficult, and it took me a long time to feel comfortable doing that. So I think now I'm hyper aware of of the challenge that it actually is to like engage with someone about in a conversation about their illness. And I think that this does provide that stepping stone to get there.
Is your mom still alive?
She is, yeah.
Have you had her on the show yet?
We did, yeah. Recently.
She was. I think we released her episode a few weeks ago,
and it was incredible.
It was amazing.
It was nuts.
Yeah.
But that was a long time in the making too, because she had recovered from her cancer about 1.5 years ago, and CBC did a documentary with us a couple of years ago, pretty early on in the podcast, and my mom was going through her bladder cancer at that time. And the director actually encouraged me to talk to her for that film. And that was the stepping stone. That was the push that I needed to actually sit down and have that conversation with her. But after we did that, they came in and they filmed it. They left about half an hour later. We continued to talk at my house for like 3 hours after that. But then it was kind of like, okay, well, we did it, so now we don't need to do it again. And it was like another 2 years that we didn't really talk about it in the same way that we did when we had her on the podcast like a month ago.
Yeah,
so
it was really, really profound.
It's
and like someone
it's difficult to do.
Who, like, for your mom, someone who's obviously very close to us and close to like why you are the way that you are, and she's also kind of a second mom to me. I've known Brian and I have been best friends since we were 10 years old, and so it was like a really, really, really amazing thing.
How did you meet when you were 10?
I moved in next door. I moved in across the street.
It's funny though, like for me, talking to my mom on the podcast with Taylor and Jer there was so normal. But I think about like if we didn't have microphones and like you're like, Mom, we're gonna sit down and talk about your mental health. My two friends are gonna come over.
How bizarre would that be?
But the two friends thing for sure. But that's the thing that's something that we've come back to on the podcast a lot. Is at one point we kind of had this thought, okay, well, how do we make this really applicable to the everyday person, the everybody out there who doesn't have a podcast to invite somebody onto to talk about their illness, and how do they do this? You know, have we created this sort of unattainable thing because we're doing this and this makes it easy because we scheduled it and planned it and we know we're going to do it? And then that was sort of this revelation, like, well, maybe that's what we need to do. We need to set aside specific time to talk about it, because everybody tends to think that, okay, how am I going to bring this up while I'm watching TV with my friend? How am I going to bring this up over a coffee that had nothing to do with talking about being sick? How do I just bring it up in this situation when it just doesn't fit?
Just walk in on your friend taking his nebulizer in the room.
Right, yeah. It's like, sometimes it is this spontaneous thing, but maybe this scheduled, like, hey man, I'd really like to sit down, whether it's the person whether it's a friend of someone who's sick or a family member, or it's the person that is sick that wants to talk, to make time and to make specific time to sit down and talk about it, because I think that kind of creates the understanding and the expectation that we're going to sit down and do this. And I think it would make it a lot easier.
Yeah. Jeremie, have you always been so open about your cystic fibrosis, and especially being funny about it?
No, not really. When I was younger, when I was a child, I was pretty ashamed about living with CF. I would never be caught taking my medication. I didn't ever want to really like explain it to people. And then there wasn't like one moment where it shifted. I think it was a bunch of different scenarios in my life that sort of brought me to where I eventually landed, which is this place where I can openly speak about it, and I find humor in it regularly. But I think one of the things that actually played a major role in it was acting, right? So I've talked about this a couple of times, but like when I was growing up, my heroes were people like Jim Carrey and like Adam Sandler and George Carlin, Chris Farley. Like those were the guys that I looked up to, and I think because I was if I was ever reading a book as a kid, I was reading a George Carlin book. I was trying to find comedy everywhere, and so that played a big role in the way that I sort of saw the world through this lens of mockery. But then on top of that, performance and acting and exploring that side of myself brought out this sense of self-discovery that I think made me feel a little bit more comfortable with talking openly or even just like exploring the idea of what it means to live with cystic fibrosis. I remember a project that we did. I went to Ryerson here in Toronto for acting, and Sheldon, what was Sheldon's last name? We had a creative writing teacher named Sheldon, and he basically wanted us to write a creative expression piece about like the hardest thing we've ever gone through. And then we were supposed to present that to everyone the next day. And I remember just like going, fuck it. I'm just going to write about the time that I almost had my bowels removed because I was so sick when I was 14 or whatever. Something I never told really anybody about. And I wrote this thing out, and there were a couple like jokes in there, and it felt it was like, yeah, this feels nice. All right. And I went in the next day and I presented it to the class. And within that, 6-minute presentation of reading it to my classmates, they all know me very well, there was a mix of people crying, like really crying, and hearing the struggle that I went through. Yet at the same time, there was like these bouts of laughter that just like broke the tension of that sadness. And I remember just like feeling, it felt so freeing. And I think from like that moment forward, I didn't really look back.
You can hear that story on the very first episode.
Yeah, exactly. That exact story was one of the first things that we talked about on the show.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was a process to get to that point, but I really do think it has a lot to do with the fact that comedy was just something that was so important to me, and also just that like that self-discovery of what it means to be an actor,
I find that people, especially talking about vulnerable things, they either use comedy to avoid the heart of something, or they use it to get to the heart of something.
Yeah, and that's a thing that I feel like a lot of people might confuse Sickboy with, like you're masking the seriousness by using humor as a crutch.
We've gotten a little bit of that feedback.
Yeah.
I think more so asking, like, is that
how it works?
Yeah, and it's going, no, it's more so using it as a tool to then open up into the harder things. Like, can we start a conversation and become very relaxed and comfortable with each other using humor. And I find that typically especially with our live shows, because there is this like added degree of entertainment that you're trying to bring to a live audience. Our live shows, and this was really true, we did a show in Calgary the other night where the energy and the comedy and the chaos of the conversation was like way up here in our throat. Like it was so high. And the first 20, 25 minutes were just, I mean, like I actually, when I was sitting still and not speaking, my jaw was shaking because it was sore from laughing. My cheeks were sore.
Yeah.
I couldn't keep my jaw straight.
It was wild.
It was insane.
Yeah.
And it kind of hit this fever pitch, and it was so funny, and the crowd was so engaged and laughing at every moment. And then it just dropped down into this super insightful and thoughtful place. And our guest was amazing, and she was talking about these things in such a thoughtful and meaningful way.
And you could hear a pin drop.
Yeah.
Like you knew that everyone in that room was so in tune, was listening so deeply. And I think
it was the laughter.
I think it's because
I was just going to say, do you think it would have been like that had you not opened it up with
the laughter brought us there. It brought us there.
But it's kind of like treading water a bit too, right? Like the more, I think the more manageable pace you go at, like if you're kind of just treading there, you're able to stay there for longer. But if you go at it like too hard, then you almost, I think you burn out, and you end up avoiding the topic in general. Like I think it's a way to,
it was
like,
going
kind of
in
like,
that direction.
Yeah, exactly. And because it almost like if you laugh too much, then you almost trivialize it. But it's a really great tool to get to that point that you want to get to.
And
I think
it came down, and I think it was. I think the laughter brought us to that place where we could then, not only us but also the crowd, because they're very much a part of the energy of everything that's happening, and allowed us to go to this place that I'm not sure if we would have got to if it wasn't for the kind of the chaos of the first little while. That was just so funny and silly.
I think it depends on why you're going in and what you're trying to do. Are you going in to try to make people laugh, or are you going in to try to have these conversations and open people up?
Yeah, because like not all of the live shows are like that either. I mean, we've had live show experiences where, Grace, for example, in Ottawa, I was going into that I've met Grace before. I like semi knew her through competitive improv when we were in high school. I know she's hilarious, and I know she's very quick, and she's very witty. And so I was going, this is gonna be a laugh fest. And we go in, and there's some laughter here and there, but it was a very the tone of that conversation was very somber's not the right word, but it wasn't this comedy show.
Right, more muted.
It was. I
think it depends on what, of course, that person is bringing to the day.
Yeah.
Actually, that's a good point. What are some of your what are the guests that stand out, or maybe if you could pick one guest that stands out for each of you from your career so far in doing this, who would it be?
You?
Oh, thank you. But
I actually mean that. Like, I mean that you're the conversation we had with you, and if anyone's listening to this and they haven't heard that episode, go back and listen to it after this, because
I wasn't fishing for that, by the way.
No, we know. We see what you were doing there, Mark.
I know you weren't, but I do mean it, because you're the kind of guest who simultaneously is you're ready to sit down and have a conversation. You are super open to opening up any box that comes with what you've gone through, but you're also you're smart, and you know how to like bat back and forth in a conversation. And those are always my favorite. It's hard when, and we don't run into this often, but sometimes you'll get someone in who really just wants to sit and
be asked,
and then they'll respond, and that's it. And that's okay. That's okay. Those conversations, there's lots to take from those, and lots to glean from that.
That's the nature of having guests who are just, everyday, average, normal people. Like we're not a podcast that has celebrity guests all the time who are talking about their, special.
Yeah, rarely do we ever.
Once in a lifetime. Yeah, like everybody's a normal, average person. Yeah. Which means that they might not actually have experience talking on a microphone and doing things like nerves is a big thing that can come up too. And we could anticipate that this might be a really great guest. They have a really great story, but they're just not comfortable talking on a microphone.
Yeah. I mean, when you can sit down with anybody, like our episode with you, like Jeremie said, really, maybe lucky, maybe it's a miracle, I don't know, but some of the first few people that we sat down with really, like Brian said about Matt Amiot, really set the benchmark for what we wanted to do, because there was not only questions asked about their experience, but there was an exchange of ideas, and there was a conversation about what we think about life and mortality and our own experience about being sick or being healthy and being with people or in love with people or friends or family with people who are sick. And that exchange of ideas, when we sit down and have that, is a really special moment.
Yeah, this is a good point, because it's all well and good to talk the talk, and you guys do a show where you're talking to people who are terminally ill, and you've had guests who have died since doing your show. What's that like?
It doesn't get easy. Yeah, it's hard.
Like when you ask who some of our memorable guests are, like I think for the three of us, Brandon Thomas really sticks out. He's somebody who came in early on in our adventure into this project. Like, he came on and he was this everyday, average, normal guy, 19 years old, and he had the same type of cancer that Terry Fox did. So he had this crazy leg amputation and this surgery called the Van Ness rotationplasty, and it was a really wild story, but he was just such an authentic, like genuine, beautiful individual that when we left the room after the first recording, like all three of us wanted to continue hanging out with him.
And we did.
So he was hanging out, he was coming and hanging out, like he slept at all of our houses, I think, a number of times in that like first 6 months after the recording, and we had him back on the podcast again. He guest hosts a show with us, and his cancer unfortunately kept coming back, and after his fourth occurrence of having this cancer, it eventually took his life. And for me, like, learning about building that genuine, authentic connection through conversation, like he's taught me so much about your ability to connect with an individual in a short amount of time. Like, he became our best friend in 2 years. And
there's something to be said about everybody that we've talked to who's really close to death. If in hindsight, looking back, I would probably make the argument that everybody who's facing mortality in a not too distant sense is really thoughtful. And there's something that close proximity to death, I think that it brings to people. And but the caveat, or the interesting thing about that, is that we are all facing our mortality. We just don't think about it. So we all, I think, have this opportunity to be taught by mortality and by death, and where we are in relation to it, or where we might be in relation to it, that can make us all more thoughtful and insightful people.
When you think about something like death, you think, like, it forces you to almost ask yourself these questions, like, well, what's important to me in life? You know, like, how can I maximize my time that I have here? And things like this that we like Taylor mentioned, we don't think about these things regularly because to us, death is so far away. You know, it's not something that we can tangibly feel coming up.
Yeah, that was one of the most impactful messages, Jeremie, from your TEDx Toronto talk, which I still think should be the most popular TEDx Toronto talk ever. I said that at the time, too.
I know, I remember.
I was privileged to be in the audience for it. But that message really struck me to say, maybe you can articulate better, you could articulate it better than I can, but to set an alarm in your phone to remind yourself.
Yeah. Well, so the whole idea of that came from the fact that this notion that I was living with this idea that 30 was going to be pretty much my cap. I wasn't going to live very much beyond that. And that's all due to statistics based on the life expectancy of people living with cystic fibrosis and what I had learned when I was a youth. And so I've been in looking back at my life, I realized I was living my life with this alarm that's been set, 30. And when I get there, it's over. So how do I want to live between now and that moment? Well, I want to squeeze out every ounce of life that I can. And it changed the way that I lived my life. I think I was a little bit more of what's the word? When you just do impulsive. Yeah, there we go. I had a
what did you say?
Present.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I was present, but like present. I was very impulsive. Like I remember when I met my wife. It was like 2 weeks in, and I was like, God, I think I'm in love with her. And then like 3 weeks in, I was like, I'm probably gonna marry this one. And then 4 weeks in, I think I even said to her, I'm going to marry you one day, but I need you to forget I said that. I said that to her like 4 weeks in. And then I did. I was like, I'm 23. This is very young to get married, but screw it. I love this girl. I'm going to be with her until I die. I only have 7 years left. So I better make the most of it.
You've always accelerated things because of your relationship to death.
Yeah, everything is accelerated. Everything is like there's this almost like impatient voice in the back of my head with everything. I just want to get it done. Let's get it done. Let's go. Let's take the next step. And so I'm now 30, and when I gave that talk at TEDx, I was about 3 months away from 30, and I remember saying in that talk, like when I hit that day, everything from then on is bonus time. And how beautiful of an idea would it be if everyone could adopt that notion that you have your own alarm. Like your clock is also ticking. So what if you just set your own clock right now? Like how long do you think you have? And even if, of course you don't know if it's true or not, but how would it change the way you go about your day? If you thought to yourself, maybe I only have 5 years left. I bet you'd live a little bit differently. I bet you'd live with just a little bit more, compassion, a little bit more love, a little bit more inviting, a little bit more laughter into your life.
Well, on a very real note, we spoke to somebody just a month ago who was a really big advocate for MAID, medical assistance in dying, and Audrey Parker, and her date. She knew her date, and
we recorded with her on October 3rd, and her date to die through MAID was November 1st. And that conversation was so huge for me because it like validated everything that I've really strongly believed in terms of what it means to live knowing that you're going to die. She was astoundingly beautiful in all aspects, and she lived the shit out of her life for that last 28 days.
She was so accepting though, and like so comfortable with the idea of dying that it would like that's what was inspiring.
She was a real beacon of light for people who are going through a really, really tough time with their mortality. People who are sick with any number of things that are bringing them closer to their mortality than quote unquote usual or as expected. And that she could sit down and with a huge smile tell us that she is accepting and she is ready and she is planning and she's enjoying the experience and she's enjoying the planning and the and everything that goes along with making sure that she just has an amazing last month. Like she has an amazing and beautiful exit, and that she shares this experience with everybody to go, hey, it's okay. It's not. It is this huge thing, and it can be very daunting, but it doesn't need to be this. It doesn't need to be fully like engulfing and sad and heavy. It can be every emotion rolled into this experience. And I think that the kind of going back to kind of how we started a little bit of this conversation was that it tends to skew towards one end of the emotional spectrum, and there are so many more to explore. And through all the episodes that we've recorded, we've really been able to talk with guests that have hit on a ton of that emotional range, and it's been amazing.
Jer, I'm curious to know on that note, like knowing that you share the same sentiments as Audrey, like being comfortable with death. How challenging is it to support the people around you, knowing that you're so comfortable, but oftentimes a lot of your loved ones and stuff still fear the day that you eventually won't be here?
Right. Well, I honestly, I think that the podcast is like a pretty awesome tool for me to just like hammer home that idea that death is coming and it's going to be a really beautiful transition. So get ready.
Like having living with a chronic terminal illness, you have that catalyst to be able to look at death in a special way. But for people like Taylor and I, for example, who don't live with something like that, it is a lot harder to find something to meditate on, to like kind of to get to that place.
Yeah, 100%.
So it's I think that can be, I know that Audrey was saying like a lot of her time was spent like managing the people around her to try to make sure that they were comfortable with the idea too.
Yeah. Yeah. And I honestly, I feel like the podcast is selfishly for myself. It's like, it is this perfect excuse for me to
it's coming.
Continue talking about it. And like, because the more you talk about it, the more, it's not ever going to be easy.
No.
But the more you discuss it, the more you talk about it, the more open people are going to become about that, that idea of that transition. So,
well, and this is very much obviously a team effort among friends. But Jeremie, do you consider this your legacy?
100%. Yeah, I was like, there's a line in the documentary where I'm saying like, I'm not going to have a kid. I can't have I can have a kid if I want to do in vitro, but I don't want a kid. This is my kid. This is our kid. We're raising this baby, and when I die, just like if I had an actual human baby, I want that thing to continue to grow and to continue to add to society and to go on and do beautiful things and help people and change people's lives. And that's what Sickboy is. That is our child that us three fathers are rearing together.
3 men and a baby.
Yeah, that's it. Like this is my legacy. Like this I'm saying it right here, right now. If I die tomorrow, this doesn't end here. It continues on.
We'll find a co-parent too.
Yeah, Mark will step in. Mark will be the new host. But yeah, it totally is. This is.
When you are gone, how do you want people to remember you?
I don't want people to forget that that I can be an asshole sometimes. I want people to remember. I want people to remember me for exactly who I am and who I was.
We don't forget that part.
Kind of an asshole.
I'd be very ingrained.
Yeah. I want people to remember all aspects of me. I want people to remember that, I can be really funny, but I can also be really frustrating, and I can be really impatient. And I think that, the way that I live my life, and the way that, and talking about the TEDx talk and when I gave that talk, there's so many people that would come up to me afterwards and say how it affected them and how they wish they saw the world in that way. But like, also you have to understand too that it's not a perfect way of going about life, like, and I think there's lessons to be learned in that. Like, when I'm dead, take those lessons, and understand, like, I'm 30 now. I didn't think I was going to go this far. And so up to this point in my life, I didn't save money or anything like that. You know what I mean? Like I was so dumb with money. These are lessons I think that like people can learn and
at your funeral, when I speak at it, I will make sure, because funerals are a little too skewed towards sadness. Oh, they did all these nice things and they were all this great person.
Yeah,
I'll make sure.
It's all about the dead person.
You better roast me.
I'll make sure people remember that you could have your days.
Yeah. Roast me, because I have a hard time taking a roast while I'm alive. So when I'm dead, I won't be here to.
Yeah, you can't even respond.
That's right. I'm not going to be here to respond to it. So
exactly.
Get it in while you can.
Absolutely.
Do you have any early roasts while he is around?
It's the podcast. The podcast is basically a weekly like mini roast of all of us in some way, shape, or form. Someone was saying that last night because we did a live show last night, and a friend of ours who we went out for a drink with afterwards said something along the lines of like, you guys are just kind of digging at each other in these really subtle ways that sometimes people pick up on and sometimes they don't, because they're these like little tiny like you say something and I go and it's something as simple as that, and it just gets slid in there, and we're kind of constantly roasting each other in small ways.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I hope you continue to do it for many years, hopefully to come.
Yeah, well, not too many.
People.
I mean,
God, I can't imagine legs for so long.
Yeah, I can't imagine being 60. Like, that's just
you have an aversion to being again normal age.
I definitely do. I definitely do. Like that sounds really scary and daunting and horrible to me. But to me, when I meet people who are 60, I'm like, look at you go.
Well, you've spent so much time thinking it's going to be this long, and now science is just getting in the way.
I'm tired.
Like, oh God, if it wasn't for science, I'd be gone.
Yeah.
Well, on that note, well, I want to thank all three of you for coming in and since joining E1 and being the first guest since doing that. And, you guys are changing the world. It really is inspiring to me. I love finding things that inspire me, and every single episode that you guys do is extraordinary. So I want to thank you for the light that you guys are putting into the world. You guys are that beacon that you mentioned, Taylor, for so many people. And
thanks.
Let's leave it with if there's one thing that you've learned from doing this podcast over the last few years, what would you like to tell the listeners?
I mean, there's a number of those things that I think we've learned, but I think one of the ones that really stick out to me, and I think for all three of us, is that life is just far too short for any amount of small talk. Just cut through that shit and get to the real stuff. Be open to talking to each other about the stuff that matters, because that's a better use of your time, and you don't have much time. No one has much time. Regardless of whether you live to 80 or not. That's not much time. So skip the small talk, get into it. Get dirty.
Yeah. For me it's everybody, like everybody has their challenges, and I think that we're really quick sometimes to look at it, like compare ourselves to other people. And there are things that, when you actually dig into a conversation with someone and you learn about all the things that they've been through, I think there's a lot of experiences that are really relatable. And when you're able to be more compassionate and more empathetic and understanding that, everybody has their own set of those things, then I think you're able to be a kinder person.
Yeah.
We had this conversation really early on in the show with a guy named Leighton, and he was a guest of ours that passed away about a year after we had recorded our episode with him, a little over a year. And when we recorded with him, he knew that he was going to pass away. He didn't know the time. He just had he knew that his cancer was very aggressive, and it would take him in the not too distant future. And I remember asking him, and this was the first conversation that we had with somebody who was really facing their mortality very quickly. And I asked, is it true what you kind of hear, that when your death is fast approaching, do you start seeing the world in a different way? Do you start seeing colors more vividly? Do you start seeing things more beautifully? Is that real, or is that just something that the movies have made up? And the reality for a lot of people is that when you find out that your mortality is approaching, it's not the next day. It can be a really drawn out experience. And he said, well, yeah, it was for a little bit, but then I just got used to it. He got used to the idea that his mortality was coming. And it kind of struck me as this really, this great lesson in the human condition, that we can take anything for granted. Even our lives, when we know they're coming to an end. And that was just like a really profound lesson for me, that you can take anything for granted, even life itself when you know that it doesn't have much time left. Yeah, it was just really, really hit me.
So remind yourself not to take anything for granted.
Right. Yeah, and that you will, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But to then every so often, periodically, find that inspiration that allows you to find all the beauty and find all the amazing experiences in life and all the things that you do take for granted, and then you'll slowly take them for granted again. But then remind yourself. It's like it's this constant reminder. It's like, you don't clean your house once and it's done. You clean it all the time. You take a shower all the time. Like there's upkeep that you need to do with your inspiration and how you go forward in life. And it's not a bad thing to take it for granted. It's another opportunity to refine the beauty that is life.
Jeremie, Brian, Taylor, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, that's my conversation with the guys from Sickboy, Jeremie Saunders, Brian Stever, and Taylor Macgillivary. Wasn't that awesome? I love talking to them. And Jeremie in particular, I was at, he did a TEDx Toronto talk probably 2 years ago, I want to say. And it was just so great. And to be able to see him speak live, to talk to him in person, I think it was an Airbnb that they had where we had done my episode of their show. So we had them into our little tiny studio here to record that one. But go check out their show. Check out all of their individual work. And I'll share it on my social media platforms as well. So follow me. I'm at Mark Hennick, at MarkHennick on Twitter, on Facebook, on Instagram. I'm also on a bunch of other stuff if you want to creep me there. I don't know, I think I'm on Reddit. I post there sometimes, but I don't really know. Tumblr maybe, but only because I think Instagram has an automatic function that posts to Tumblr. Anyway, I'm on all those places, so go find me. You can also go to my website, markhennick.com, markhennick.com/so-called-normal. Go to Apple Podcasts, subscribe to the show, leave us a rating, like us, love us, leave a beautiful comment on the bottom, and share with all your friends, please. It's really important to the success of the show to make sure that we get this out to as many people as possible. If you want to try out a free trial of psychotherapy, online, safe, effective psychotherapy with people who are trained, who know what they're doing, who are licensed and credentialed, go over to betterhelp.com/Mark, enter the promo code Mark, and you can get a free trial of psychotherapy courtesy of BetterHelp with some trained professionals. I think that's it for me. I think I got all of the things said there that I needed to say. So hope you enjoyed the show. This has been So-Called Normal, and I'm Mark Hennick.